Have you ever thought about the differences between rest and relaxation? We'll talk about it today on week 32 of Connecting with Christ. Remember to subscribe and welcome back. Hey everyone, we are on week 32 of Connecting with Christ. We are still under the theme of rest. This is only the second recording under that theme. And today's devotional is written by Leontyne Peterson. And it's entitled Relaxation versus Rest. Now, you might recall that Lee wrote another devotional for us, week 25, I believe. And I said then that calling her Leontyne, that's just not natural. So I have to say, Lee, as you see, I'm struggling sometimes when people write under their government names, and that's not what I'm used to, so it doesn't feel natural. But I do need to say that her published name is Leontyne Peterson. Here on out, I am referring to her as Lee, which is how I was introduced to her and how I know her and how I will be able to get through this recording without stumbling every time I have to say her name. There's nothing wrong with her name. Let me just make that clear, that the stumble isn't because I think something is wrong with her name. The stumble is me and my tongue twistedness, okay? With all of that said, let's dive into it. So, Lee's devotional, as I said, is called Relaxation versus Rest. And she uses Psalm 127, verse 2 as her foundational scripture. That scripture reads, "It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones." And that is from the New Living Translation. In her devotional, Lee starts out talking about how she was at a point in her walk where she was just upset with God. Within an 8-year time frame, she lost her dad, her mom, and 2 of her sisters. And then she was working from sunup until the sun was way down, and she was just exhausted. And she was really taken aback by all the losses. She makes a comment in the devotional that she had decided to serve God, and it was like he was punishing her after she said yes to him. Then she has all these deaths, and I thought that was a good point just to stop and pause there for a second, because a lot of times people say, I started serving God and this happened and that happened, and it seemed like I was better off before I pledged my allegiance to him. Well, one, you were not better off, so let me just say that. But I do understand sometimes that, we have problems in the world, and we come to Christ and think that we won't have problems. Bad news, good news, however you want to perceive it, is that problems are just a fact of life, whether you're walking with the Lord or not. For me, personally, I don't see how people make it without the Lord. I'm like, I just don't, because when problems arise, he all I got. Now, when I say he all I got, and trust me, I do understand that my English there was not grammatically correct. I get it. I'm just saying he all I got. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have the support of anyone else. As you all know, I have the bomb support system, and I really do. I have an amazing support system. Even with an amazing support system, there is no one in my life who can reach down to the depths of my soul, touch those painful areas, fearful areas, those insecure areas, those shy ish, because I'm really not shy, areas. No one can do that but the Lord. So for Lee, when she was talking about coming to this crossroads and do I stay on the path with Jesus or do I turn and go without him? Thankfully, she did decide to stay on that path with him. And he allowed her to have her moments. He also helped her through the moments. And what Lee talks about is how she badly needed to rest. And there was a situation that took her down to where she was forced to rest. So one moral of that story that she shares is that we may need to reevaluate our situation and circumstances and come to rest when we know we need it before we find ourselves in a predicament where we have no other choice but to sit still. I didn't really think about differences between rest and relaxation until Lee wrote this devotional. And I remember when she submitted it and I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the title and I'm like, relaxation versus rest. Then I'm reading it and then you dig a little deeper because one thing that I do appreciate about every single contributor to this devotional project is that I learned something. The first time that I'm reading the devotionals, it was really to edit and to put them together in a way to package them beautifully in the book. But then as you reread and you start to really dig into these stories and the messages, like it hit me. And so I want to spend just a few moments speaking about differences between rest and relaxation. Lee doesn't go into a lot of depth about these differences in her devotional, although she makes some very, very good points. I thought it would be beneficial to point out some differences so that you can then take this information and apply it to your own life. So when we think of rest, rest is that period where we stopped doing something, right? So at least for me, when I say rest, I'm normally thinking of I've stopped working, I've stopped doing whatever. Like I'm just taking, again, I would call it a me day. And I cease from all activity. And I've shared previously about how I have to set boundaries around my work to ensure that I'm not becoming a workaholic and that I am taking time to rest. So, rest is that cessation, stopping from whatever activities that we might be engaged in. Relaxation is more of the easing of emotional or physical tension through some kind of enjoyable or calming activities. And it's not that they have to be mutually exclusive. Most of us probably relax and rest all in one. Rest begins with trusting God and not only stopping the activity. There's a trust factor in there as well, because most people who feel compelled to work continuously without resting, there's something else going on underneath that chronic work. Like I shared with you, for me, it's grief, right? So I have to be intentional. For other people, it might be fear, it might be pride, it could be a number of things. I can't necessarily categorize every single reason why somebody might just keep working chronically. But that fear, for instance, if we take fear for an example, fear of lack, fear of not having certain accomplishments, fear of a lot of things. So, in order to stop working yourself so much, you have to trust that God will provide for your needs. Here's the thing about rest, though, which is why I believe there is a difference between rest and relaxation. Here's the thing about rest. You can physically rest from an activity, but still mentally stress about it. Think about people who lie down at night to go to sleep. And let's say they're lying in their bed completely still, but their mind is going. They're not getting a good night's sleep because they're too worried about something. So, rest involves an element of us also casting all of our cares upon the Lord. Rest requires complete surrender. We surrender our pressures, our deadlines, our self-reliance to God. I would like you to ask yourself a question. What burden are you carrying as though everything depends on you? Is it being a provider for your family? Is it being the only person at church who volunteers to lead every committee? Because, of course, if you don't lead it, everything's going to fall apart. Right? So think about that. Seriously. What burden are you carrying as though everything depends on you? I asked you to reflect on that question, right? I want to share an example of a time when I thought something solely relied on me. It was around maybe 2004, 2005. I think it was mid 2005, early. Okay, dates don't matter. But it was around the time when my first book came out. And at that time, I was volunteering for Sunday school class at my previous church. Actually, it was the children's Sunday school class. So I was volunteering for that, and part of the reason why I chose to volunteer to teach the children's class is because my children were also in a class, even though I'm not even sure that I taught them now. Now that I think about it, I don't even recall if I was their Sunday school teacher. Any. Not the moral of the story. Move on, Yolanda. So, uh, it was around the time, like I said, when my first book was coming out and I was getting ready to go on tour. So my mom would come on the weekends to help my husband with the children, and it was just a lot. It was a lot during that time. Well, I remember reaching out to the children's ministry leader at that time, and I sent her this long email. And I'm just like, I'm not going to be able to commit and this and that, and I'm so sorry. And I mean, I just felt horrible because, I had been doing it for quite a while at that time, and apparently I felt I was letting her down by stepping away from the role, and it was a very long and unnecessary apologetic email. And I remember her response to me, and she said, "Don't you ever feel bad because you have been called to a different assignment. You getting out the way is actually giving someone else an opportunity to step into ministry." That's been over 20 years. And to my knowledge, that ministry has not suffered one time since I walked away. I share that example hoping that you will see that you're not the only one who can do it. People get caught up with things at work. I was contracted with a company through Yo Productions, and I was doing some work, and the money was funny. And I decided after after my husband was like, don't you sign another contract. He's like, because he had even told me before I signed the contract, the last contract. He's like, "Babe, are you sure this is what you want to do?" But I'm like, "Oh yes, And he's like, "All right, you about to go through it because you already know what it's about." So he's like, "Hey, it's cool." So, what happened, and I won't get into a lot of detail, but I will say that there was a meeting where, because I hadn't signed a contract to renew work. And in the meeting, someone is telling me that I am very good at this work and they know my talents, my skills, and I'm the only one who can do it. And I said, "I don't need the flattery." I said, "Because I know if the Lord were to take me at this very minute, y'all would find somebody else to come in and take my place." And guess what? They did. So, when you think everything revolves around you, it does not. It does not. That was the first point. Second point, so that was about rest. But relaxation then refreshes our body and our mind, but it doesn't necessarily address our spirit and spiritual rest. It can, but it all depends on what it is that we're doing. So, for example, there might be activities that involve relaxation as we know it, because there are things that we like to do, but those activities do not address our spirit. And sometimes those activities can actually harm our spirit. Let me give you an example of what I mean. There are some activities that people engage in for relaxation that are, trying to keep this PG, that are detrimental. For example, somebody can engage in physical activity, right? As a way to escape or relax. But if that isn't aligned with the biblical order of things, you've damaged your spirit. The bottom line is that any relaxation, if we really want to address our spirit in that as well and combine it with rest, healthy relaxation should restore us rather than distract us from unresolved problems or responsibilities. So you shouldn't necessarily use relaxation as just a tool of escape, because then it just becomes a temporary fix versus something that you're truly doing for your holistic enjoyment rather than escape. And there are a lot of things that people do to escape, and some of those things are harmful. For example, substance abuse. People can use substances to escape as a form of relaxation, but at the end of the day, it hasn't done anything to change the problem or to address their spirit. They've just escaped. So as we wrap up this devotional, I want you to think about how you can build a healthier rhythm of work, rest, worship, and recreation. How can you do that in a way that restores your body, mind, and soul? I can't give you a formula because we are all unique. We are all different. And so there will be aspects that might work for me that don't work for you. The key is to trust God in rest, receive refreshment in relaxation, and return renewed and ready to fulfill purposeful work. Hopefully something I said made sense. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I say it every week, not simply to be repetitive, but because I do mean it. Thank you. May God bless you, and may you be a blessing to someone else. And until next week, keep connecting with Christ. Thank you for watching. To learn more or to purchase a copy of Connecting with Christ, 52 weekly devotionals to nurture spiritual growth, please click one of the links in the description or visit yoproductions.net. Also note that the views expressed by any interviewed contributor may or may not reflect those of the host or Yo Productions. If this video or any content on this channel has encouraged you, I invite you to subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below. Also, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone you believe may be blessed by its content. Until we meet again, continue to stay connected with Christ.